Have you ever stopped to think about the strangest object in your wallet? Maybe you'd say it's an old photo, a forgotten card, or even a random piece of paper. But the truth is, the most fascinating item is probably money itself. We use money almost every single day to buy food, to pay bills, to travel, to invest, to make our dreams come true. Yet very few people know the incredible secrets hidden behind the banknotes and coins they carry around. For example, did you know that a $100 trillion banknote actually existed, and that most of the money in the world doesn't physically exist at all, or that a single coin could be worth millions to collectors? Today, we're taking a journey behind the scenes of money. You'll discover unbelievable facts, learn how certain currencies became powerful, enough to influence the entire world, and uncover stories that may change the way you look at the cash in your pocket forever. Stay until the end, because the final fact reveals something that affects almost everyone on Earth, even those who have never invested a single dollar. So let's get started. And the first curiosity is literally in your hands. Why are banknotes different sizes? Take a few banknotes out right now. If you have bills of different denominations, place them side by side. Do you notice anything? Most people have never noticed it. But banknotes come in different sizes. And it's not just a matter of design. There's a very important reason behind it. When we think about money, we usually focus only on the value printed on it. But money needs to be accessible to everyone, including people with visual impairments. That's why, in many countries, banknotes are made in different lengths. This allows someone to identify the denomination simply by touch. It may seem like a small detail, but imagine the impact this has on millions of people. It also helps prevent mistakes during everyday transactions. Cashiers, vendors, and customers can recognize denominations much more quickly. It's a simple solution to a major problem. But if the size of banknotes surprises you, wait until you hear about the largest banknote ever created. And we're not talking about $1,000, not 1 million, not even 1 billion. We're talking about something much bigger. The $100 trillion banknote. Imagine waking up one morning with a paycheck worth millions of dollars. You would probably feel incredibly wealthy. Now imagine discovering that it's not even enough to buy a loaf of bread. It sounds absurd, but that's exactly what happened in Zimbabwe. In the early 2000s, the country experienced one of the worst economic crises in history. Prices began rising at an alarming rate. The government believed it could solve the problem by printing more money. But then something dangerous happened. The more money that was printed, the less valuable it became. Prices skyrocketed every single day. At times, they doubled within just a few hours. People rushed to stores as soon as they got paid because they knew that by the next day, their money would be worth much less. The situation spiraled completely out of control. The government began printing increasingly larger denominations. Thousands, millions, billions, trillions, until one of the most famous banknotes in history was introduced. The 100 trillion Zimbabwean dollar note. Yes, 1,000. 1,000. 1,000. A number so enormous that many people can barely read it correctly. The most astonishing part, despite the massive number printed on it, it couldn't buy very much. Today, these notes are collectors and serve as a powerful reminder of how inflation can destroy a currency. But this story raises an interesting question. If printing money seems so easy, why don't governments just print more so everyone can become rich? The answer lies in another fascinating fact. How much does it cost to produce a 100 reais banknote? When you look at a 100 reais banknote, you might think it costs almost 100 reais to produce, but the reality is completely different. The manufacturing cost is only a tiny fraction of the value printed on it. That's because the value of money isn't in the paper itself, it's in trust. Before we talk about trust, It's worth understanding what's actually built into a banknote. At first glance, it looks like nothing more than a colorful piece of paper, but it's packed with advanced technology. Watermarks, security threads, special inks, microprinting, features visible only under ultraviolet light, raised printing that you can feel with your fingertips. Every detail is designed to make life difficult for counterfeiters. Producing a banknote requires sophisticated equipment, strict quality control, and specialized materials. So even though it costs far less than its face value, manufacturing it is anything but simple. And here's an interesting detail. A counterfeit bill may look perfect to the eye, but it often reveals itself the moment you touch it. The raised texture of genuine printing is extremely difficult to replicate. It's precisely this technology that allows us to trust the money we use. But even a genuine banknote doesn't last forever. After years in circulation, it inevitably reaches the end of its life. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about next. What happens to torn or damaged money? Think about all the places a banknote travels during its lifetime. Supermarkets, bakeries, pharmacies, restaurants, buses, stores, banks. It changes hands hundreds or even thousands of times. Over time, it becomes wrinkled, worn out, stained, torn. And when that happens, it has to be removed from circulation. But where does it go? Does someone simply throw those banknotes in the trash? In reality, there is a highly controlled process. When they arrive at central banks, the notes pass through machines that assess their condition. Those that are no longer fit for circulation are separated. Then they are shredded into thousands of tiny pieces. In some countries, the shredded material is recycled for industrial purposes. In others, it is safely disposed of. But there's an interesting fact. Even a torn banknote may still retain its value, depending on how much of it remains intact. And they can often be exchanged for a new one. In other words, a damaged banknote doesn't automatically lose its value. Now that we understand how money is created and how its life ends, it's time to talk about the currency that dominates the world. And its story is far more fascinating than most people realize. Why does the US dollar dominate the world? To understand why the US dollar became so powerful, we need to go back in time. Imagine the world just after World War II. Much of Europe lay in ruins. Many countries were facing enormous economic hardships, but there was one nation that emerged from the war much stronger economically: the United States. Its industries were operating at full capacity, its gold reserves were massive, and its economy was becoming the most powerful in the world. It was in this context that an agreement called Bretton Woods was created. The agreement established that many currencies would be tied to the US dollar, while the dollar itself would be linked to gold. In practice, the entire world began to place its trust in the American currency. Even after that system ended, the dollar remained the preferred currency for international trade. Oil, gold, soybeans, iron ore, technology products. Most of these transactions came to be conducted in US dollars, and this created an interesting effect. The more people used the dollar, the stronger it became, and the stronger it became, the more people wanted to use it. Today, governments hold billions of dollars in reserve assets. International companies sign contracts in dollars. Investors often turn to the dollar during times of crisis. That's why fluctuations in the US dollar can have an impact on economies around the world. But there is something that circulates even more widely than the dollar itself. Something that passes through the hands of millions of people every day. And it hides a rather unpleasant secret. Money is full of bacteria. Now think for a moment. How many people do you think have touched the bill in your wallet? 10, 100, 1,000? The real answer is probably much higher. A single banknote can remain in circulation for years. During that time, it passes through supermarkets, buses, restaurants, pharmacies, stores, and thousands of different hands. That's Why scientists decided to investigate what actually lives on the surface of money. The results were surprising. Various studies have found bacteria, fungi, and other microorganisms on banknotes. Some researchers have even identified hundreds of different species. But before you rush to wash your hands, there's good news. Most of these microorganisms pose little risk to healthy individuals. Even so, this discovery highlights the incredible journey that physical money takes. The bill in your wallet today may have traveled through hundreds of cities before reaching you. And that leads us to an interesting question. If we use paper and metal today, what did people use before money existed? The answer is stranger than you might imagine. Money used to be made from very strange things. When we think of money, we usually imagine banknotes and coins, but for much of human history, neither of them existed. Early societies relied on direct barter. Someone would trade food for clothing, tools for livestock, salt for grain. But this system had a major flaw. The two parties didn't always want what the other had to offer. That's when certain objects began to serve as money. And some of them were quite unusual. Seashells, whale teeth, animal skins, cocoa beans, salt, giant stones. All of these have been used as forms of money in different parts of the world. On some Pacific islands, enormous stone discs served as symbols of wealth. Some were so heavy that they couldn't even be moved. Ownership changed hands, but the stone itself stayed exactly where it was. It was almost like an ancient version of a bank transfer. Interestingly, the word salary is historically connected to salt. In ancient times, salt was so valuable that it was used as part of the payment for workers and soldiers. This shows that the concept of money has evolved many times throughout history. But there is one category of money that is even more astonishing. Some coins can be worth absolute fortunes. Coins worth millions. Imagine finding an old coin forgotten in a drawer. You look at it and assume it's worth only a few cents. Then you discover it could be sold for millions of dollars. It sounds like something out of a movie, but it has happened many times before. In the world of collectors, there is a massive market for rare coins, and certain details can dramatically increase their value. A minting era, a very limited production run, an important historical event. Any of these factors can turn an ordinary coin into an extremely valuable treasure. Some coins have sold for the equivalent of tens of millions of reais or millions of dollars. Some were discovered in family collections. Others turned up in old safes. And some had been stored away for years without their owners realizing their true worth. That's why many experts recommend carefully examining old coins before getting rid of them. You never know when you might be holding a small fortune. And speaking of fortunes, one invention completely changed the way we access our money. The first ATM seemed like science fiction. Today, it's hard to imagine life without ATMs, but it wasn't always that way. For much of the last century, withdrawing money required visiting a bank in person. You had to go to a bank branch, wait in line, fill out paperwork, show identification. It was a slow and time-consuming process. Everything began to change in 1967. That was the year the world's first ATM was introduced. The idea seemed revolutionary. For the first time, people could withdraw cash without relying on a bank employee. Many people were skeptical of the new technology. Some believed machines would never replace human service. Others were afraid to use them. But within just a few years, ATMs spread across the globe. They became symbols of modern banking, and they paved the way for something even more remarkable. Something we now use almost every day, without even thinking about it. Most of the world's money doesn't physically exist. We've reached the most surprising fact in this video. Take a moment and think about all the money that moves around every day. Salaries, Purchases, transfers, investments, loans. Billions of transactions take place every single day. Now here's the astonishing part. Most of that money does not exist as physical cash or coins. Ele existe apenas como números, stored in computer systems. When you make an instant digital payment, for example, no physical banknotes actually move. No coins are transferred from one bank to another. Instead, digital records are simply updated. Numbers decrease in one account and increase in another. And that's it. The transaction is complete. This means that most of the world's wealth exists within electronic systems. For thousands of years, wealth meant owning something tangible, gold, silver, coins. Today, a large portion of global wealth exists only in digital form, and all signs suggest that this transformation is only beginning. Instant payments, digital wallets, central bank digital currencies, increasingly advanced financial technologies. The future of money is being built right before our eyes. And perhaps in a few decades, future generations will look at paper money the same way we look at ancient seashells. Once used as currency, money has changed countless times throughout history. It has been stone, it has been salt, it has been metal. Then it became paper, and now it is becoming digital information. But regardless of its form, it remains one of humanity's most powerful inventions. It drives economies, it builds empires, it changes lives, it topples governments, and it influences nearly every person on Earth. Now I want to hear from you. Which of these facts surprised you the most? The $100 trillion banknote? The bacteria hiding on cash? The coins worth millions? Or the fact that most of the world's money doesn't physically exist? Write your answer in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next content. Thank you for watching until the end. See you in the next video.